Hey y'all, what's up? This is your girl Sam, and I'm here with my sister A Dot. Say hello to the people, A Dot.
Hey y'all, hey y'all, hey y'all.
We are finally here for season 2 of the Spiller HR
Whoop
podcast.
whoop.
Yes, whoop whoop.
Guess
As
who's
you may
Baaaaaaazack?
notice,
Mm,
oh,
mm,
okay, okay.
mm,
Dance break,
mm,
dance break. You
mm.
can't see it unless you watch it on YouTube. But if you are watching, you're getting a gift. Let me tell you.
Eh.
Okay, we're in here. So we're here for season 2. You may have noticed some things are different, some things have changed. I'm still having mic issues, but don't worry, we're gonna get that together this season, okay? Within the next episode. So that's what I'm gonna commit to for you all. But definitely want to bring you in. We have had a break. We've gone through, I feel I've gone through a total transformation during the break, right?
Yeah.
Um, and so really just want to talk to Ada and just, we're going to give you an update on kind of where we've been, what we're doing, some hot HR topics, and then we've got some questions for you all as the listeners, right? Because we totally just appreciate you tuning in and being here to listen to us. So first things first, Ada, what have you been up to? Right? Because we haven't recorded in like 3 months.
Yeah, it's been a minute. I mean,
Yeah,
what was it, June, July, something like
yeah,
that.
yeah.
Let's see, I turned 40,
Whoop
so
whoop.
that happened. Yeah,
Meow,
you
meow, meow,
know.
meow. I can't
Pew,
do it, but
pew,
if I
pew,
were,
pew.
yeah, if I was a cat, that's what I would sound like if I was like doing that. Okay.
uh, got it.
Mhm.
Yeah, so I celebrated my 40th birthday. My husband, he is the GOAT because
Yes.
he had my aunts, my cousin, and one of my really good friends, my best friends. As some people, I think we mentioned this before, like my three amigos.
Yeah. Yeah.
So one of my three amigos, he had all of them surprise me and fly in. So
Nice.
I was like tears because I was like, oh my God, and it was just really cool, like to see everybody and just have a good time. Like it was just a good time. What else did
Yeah.
I do? Oh, I went to
You went.
Europe.
I was gonna say you definitely went outside the U.S., honey, and you did it
Yeah,
well. What was
I went
that
to
like for you,
Europe.
and how did you go?
So I went to Europe. I went on a 7-day cruise with Virgin Voyages. I highly recommend it.
Yeah.
And we went to Barcelona. We went to Rome. Went to Pisa. Went to Ibiza.
Mm.
And there's like one other, I think Toulon, which is like in
Hmm.
France or something like that. But I had a really good time. To be honest, I did not enjoy Barcelona.
No.
Um,
Why?
I was not a fan. I think it was just because, like, if you watch the news, like right before we left, the
Hmm.
locals, they were boycotting and they're like, we don't want tourists here. It's driving up the cost of living. Like, quite frankly, they're going through gentrification like the rest of us.
Yeah.
And they were upset. Like, they were protesting like the weekend before we got there, and they were like squirting tourists with water guns and all this other stuff.
Did
So
you
it
get
was just
got
like,
while you were there?
I
Like,
did
did
not.
you get wet up?
Child, no, I did not get got. I was
Just
like,
on your
look, if
face, it
they,
said no. She's
yeah,
not going.
I was like, but I think it was what bothered me the most. And like, FYI, I've been out the country before, and I
Hmm.
know when it comes to Americans in other countries, we're not well, accepted a lot of times
Mm-mm.
anyway. Add on the fact that I'm black
Yes.
and I'm a woman, so it makes
Hmm.
it even worse. But I just think they were like going out of their way to be rude. Like that's how I felt. Like
But
I get
define rude though.
being
Like, what did they do?
like, so it's like you don't understand anything I'm saying until I get loud and I start talking reckless, and then you can speak English.
Did they be like, oh?
Yeah, like so for instance, we were having brunch,
Uh huh.
and it was four of us, everybody ordered or whatever.
Hmm.
Then they bring us a dish that no one ordered.
Mm.
So we're like, hey, we didn't order that. Take it back. Okay, fine. Not a big deal.
Hmm.
10 minutes later, they bring the dish back.
No.
We didn't order this.
Mm-mm.
Well, the girl said you ordered it, but I didn't. And if you're looking at everybody else's food at the time, it doesn't even go with
With what
what
you ordered.
everybody else ordered.
Yeah.
So the whole time, but she's speaking in Spanish,
Okay.
right? So I'm like, we let it go the first time, let it go the second time, come back again the third time.
Oh,
And we're like, we did not
wow.
order that.
Uh-huh.
So she's like, she's still speaking in Spanish. So then my husband gets loud. And then she says, you don't have to talk to me like that.
Of
Oh, I
course.
thought you did. I thought you couldn't speak English.
Exactly. I thought you didn't understand what I was
I thought you didn't understand what
saying.
I was saying. So it's just like, just stuff like that. But it was
Yeah.
happening all the time. So it's like, you don't have to go out your way to like
Be
not help
rude
me or
to
not,
me.
or just be
Yeah.
rude for no reason,
Yeah.
especially when it's something you did. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
and do you think that everyone, because people will say like fairness, right? Like, do
mhm.
you think that that's kind of like the way, like the culture, or do you
I
think like other people had the
definitely
same issue?
I definitely feel like it's a culture thing, but then
Okay.
on the flip side of it, I know people that have gone to Madrid
Yeah.
and that's not their experience.
Exactly. Yeah.
And like most people that I know that have been to Madrid don't like Barcelona and vice versa. So I think
Really?
it's just like,
It's a different type of vibe.
yeah, I think the vibe is just different or whatever.
Yeah.
But outside of that, like I had a
Hmm.
good time. Like I had a really good time, but I was like, I don't have to come back here. Like
Yeah.
I'm
No.
okay.
Like I'm
I
good
don't
on
have to do
on the
this.
Barcelona.
Yeah, I'm good on that. I'm good on that. So yeah. So we did
Awesome.
that. I bought a 360 photo booth because I'm thinking about doing like a side hustle. So I
No,
did that.
and she's being modest, people. Like, let me tell you, okay, because I went to J school. I know what it is to be a photographer. She has some natural talent. She's taken some classes, but she is really good. Like, even just check out some of the pictures that we have on our IG page, on our socials.
Yeah.
Like, Ada is responsible for all of those, right? I mean, of course, I showed up in all of my natural glory and splendor. I don't want to be forgotten. Okay, when we talk about
And
credit,
we won't.
we won't. Yes, but it is very important that you understand it's about her lens. And a lot of times she wasn't even behind the camera. Like that's how good she is. She's like, you know what? Let me just set this up. Because there's picture with like both of us in there. And no, she was
Hmm.
not behind the camera. She set it up. She had it going. So she's a really good photographer, and I don't think she's giving herself credit for that. She's done some sports stuff, some action stuff. So I know she's just gonna get better because she's got that eye. You got that thing, girl. Like you just
I
know you
appreciate
got
you.
that style. Yes. And so with the 360 booth though, are you gonna do like homecomings? Like what are you planning on doing with it?
I think I just want to just kind of like, I don't know, like people have different events and stuff,
Mm-hmm.
just different things like that. So I think I just want to like rent it out for like weddings or
Mm-hmm.
parties or what I'm saying, like that type of thing, because I know people, they're like, "Oh, I like this," it just adds like more to their event and like we
Yeah.
would have a good time. So I
Mm-hmm.
think for me, I'm like, "Huh, why not?"
Yeah, and you're all about capturing memories because you do the people that are important to you, you want to just like capture those. Like I've been to her house. She's got the pictures all over the place. So she has that eye. So I guess more to come on that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
more to come. More to come.
Yes, awesome. So then, from a corporate perspective, right? Because for those of you who are maybe tuning in for the first time or you didn't tune in for season one, a little bit about us. We are HR professionals. We've got 10 plus years of experience individually. I would say between the both of us, we've got at least 20 years of HR experience, right? In all different types of sectors. I've worked in the private sector. I've worked for the government. I've worked for different industries, right? Real estate. Let's talk about tech. And the same thing for ADOT, right? Like she has a ton of union experience, which we will be talking about later on in today's show. But definitely, we have a breadth of experience between the two of us, and so if you work in HR, yes, we got the sauce. And if you work in HR, there are normally like a calendar of corporate events, right? Like there's a season for everything and everything has a reason in HR. And so some things that you might find pushing your calendar are open enrollment, right? Like this is a good time for open enrollment coming up. A lot of companies do October, some do Jan 1, but most do October.
Mhm.
Or, obviously when you join a company, a lot of companies are doing like full benefits day one. If they're not doing that, then maybe you should just look out there and see what else is available because you can't get them day one. Just so you know. So
That's
what's
right.
going on with you on your corporate calendar and your professional life? What's happening there?
It's definitely comp season.
Yeah.
Um, Definitely comp season. So we've had a lot of trainings, all the things. I have been traveling quite a bit for work.
Hmm.
Um, I just got back from LA last week. It was actually pretty productive, but it was just like all conversation. So,
Mm-hmm.
to your point, like it's definitely that time of the year, talking to people, and it just quite frankly, like you don't need no more money, if we're
Mm-mm.
being honest.
Yeah. Well, depending on where you work
It
and where
depends
you
on,
do the
yeah.
HR at.
So at my company, we
Yeah,
don't need no more money.
they don't need no more.
But
They got
yeah, it's been interesting though. So yeah, definitely come. We have some other like end of the year. I don't even know if I would say it's end of the year. It's just things that are going to happen next year. And so I'm
Yeah.
trying to get in front of it because I'm just one of those kind of people. Like I hate waiting to the last minute for stuff.
Mm-hmm.
But some of these things I just don't own. So it's just kind of
Yeah.
like I
You just
gotta
gotta
wait.
flow.
But yeah, I just gotta
Yeah.
go with it.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, it's just having those conversations with people, just talking through talking through really for my leaders, what's been difficult is telling their people like, hey, you're doing a great job, but because of the market, you're going to stay flat.
Yeah.
Flat
Right.
meaning that you're not getting an increase. And
Exactly.
so it's like, trying to coach the leaders on how to deliver that tough message. Cause it's one of those things like
Yeah.
no matter what you say, they're going
Mm-hmm.
to be upset anyway. But
Mm-hmm.
it's like, there's just a better way to land that message. So
Yeah.
that has been, I won't say the bane of my existence, but that's been what I've
The
been dealing
crux.
with, at least for
Yeah.
probably I feel like we've been talking about comp since the beginning of the year, if I'm being
Yeah.
honest. But
Well,
it
and I
got
think those
heavy
are
within the
important.
last like 3 months.
Yeah, I think those
Yeah.
are important conversations that are happening. I think because we've had so many changes just within the stability of the market, right? Like, let's go back even to COVID. And so here we are today. I think a lot of us are trying to deal with the aftermath of that. I think
Mm-hmm.
because we had a decline in essential workers and people who were willing to actually go to the site during that time, I think that's where you're going to see a lot of fluctuations, right?
Mm-hmm.
I might say, depending on the industry, it's a good chance that the people who are below the leadership are going to be recognized the most in this
Mm-hmm.
year's compensation cycle. And the only reason I say that is because, again, we are, so we talk about inflation in the market and all those other things. And I know there's overinflation and all that. I'm not an economist, but all I know from an HR perspective is that a lot of your skilled workers are going to be in high demand. They've always been in
Mm-hmm.
high demand, but I think that COVID really just like set the standard like, okay, we need somebody to do this stuff, right?
Right.
And I've even worked in organizations where management is recognized last. It's kind of like when you go into management, and I've worked with a lot of engineering organizations. So I think that's the
Mm-hmm.
thing, like not like software development, but just like straight up
Yeah.
engineering, regardless of the specialty. And so I think when you get into that, it's kind of like, well, yes, you're becoming a manager, but you're really becoming a manager because you want to be like a senior leader. And really, what you're doing in this management space is kind of not accelerating as quickly from a compensation perspective. You'll
Mm-hmm.
give them things like restricted stock units, things like that to keep them,
Yeah.
involved in the company, but they're not going to see so much on just like their hourly pay or their
Right.
annual
Yeah.
salary. So,
Yeah,
yeah.
like the cash part. Because
Hmm.
it is,
Yep.
I think it is now to a point where, like to your point, it's how do we keep people?
Hmm.
Because we don't necessarily have like the capital to
Hmm.
just like add to the cash or like the
Yes.
base, but it's
Yep.
like what can we do to at least make people still feel valued but not necessarily
Hmm.
in their direct deposit per
Yep.
se. So it's like stock options, like you said, RSUs.
Getting creative.
Yeah, just really getting creative with how
Yeah,
do we do that, because I think the market is kind of leveling out,
it is.
some.
Well,
And
and I
so it's
think
like, what do you do?
the offset to that too is like there's just so many options in terms of where people can work, how they can work. So maybe they're not giving you cash, but they may say, "Oh, hey, you have a little bit more flexibility in terms of when you come to the office, how you come to the office." Because I would say, and I mean, again, I don't work at every organization in America, but at least here in the
Mhm,
States, it's a situation where most companies who are going to do a return to office have already done it. And
mhm,
so, you would think that after COVID, we would be more inclined to say, oh, yeah, people can work from home. But I know there's been like questions about productivity. Again, we got some
Yeah.
things we're going to talk about later on in the show, but I
Yeah.
think that's another place where like leaders can be kind of
Hmm.
recognized and kind of have some negotiating
Yeah.
area, right? When we talk about how you work and where you work and how frequently you come into the office. So
Right.
interesting. Yeah.
So, what have you been doing, Sam?
I've really been talking.
Let the people know.
I've been talking with my father in heaven because he guides me. He guides me no matter where I go. I'm in the palm of his hand and he loves me so much. Um, but
Hold to God's unchanging hand.
listen, um,
Everybody ought to hold to his hand.
okay, don't get me started because I'm about
God's
to harmonize. Don't.
unchanging
We're not
hand.
doing it on the.
Hold to his
No, we're not
hand.
harmonize on this HR podcast.
Woo!
But just so you know, we are well diversified, okay? And we sit with the Father, we hear from the Lord. But so I really have been holding on to God's unchanging hand, like literally. He's been guiding me through every day. For me, I think I love HR. I have a background in HR, but I've always felt like I didn't belong there. Because to me, and I think people listening, if you have a background in HR, you may say the same thing. Sometimes conversations happen and you're like, why are we doing this again? This way, the same way we did it last year.
Yeah.
It's not as productive as we ever wanted it to be. But because I think we are a thought leader, but we are not a cost center. And I do
Mm,
think that limits the impact of HR in any corporate organization, right? Because really, you're only as good as your business says you are, right? Especially when
mm,
you look at like the roles that I've had, which have been primarily like an HR business partner. And so I've decided to kind
mm-hmm,
of take a step back from that.
mm-hmm.
I am branching out on my entrepreneurial vibe, right? Really working with consulting because for me, I think so much and ultimately the reason I went into HR is to be a change agent, right?
Mm-hmm.
I didn't come to do the things that all the other people came to do. And there's nothing wrong with that, right? Like we need that structure, we need that predictability.
Yeah.
But we also need someone who is able to come in and say, this doesn't work, and I don't care how much money we put into it. This is dumb, you know? And you can't do that from a corporate standpoint, yes. But I know there's so many people listening, they're like, yes, girl, yes, right? So these are the things that kind of go unsaid. And that's why I think that this podcast is so important because we really need a space where we can kind of talk to these things. And so for me, I do have a background in journalism. So I
Mm-hmm.
am leaning into the writing aspect of that. Also working on some consulting services, right? And so to that point, ADOT and myself, we are coming up with some corporate resources. We are planning on doing some public speaking, really just kind of getting our vibe and how do I want to say it? Not that we are dismantling HR, but we are definitely coming in with a different scope, right? Like if
Yeah.
you had a kaleidoscope and you were looking at the same HR, that may be how we want to approach things. Not that, you want to completely change up the framework, but you do want to
Yeah.
look at things differently and just see
Mm-hmm.
if they fit into the same spaces. And
Yeah.
so
Right. And I
that's
think
pretty
too,
much what
like
I've been
to
doing.
add to, yeah.
Hmm.
And I think, I mean, shit, that's a lot, but
Yeah.
I think like I think it's good to look at HR in a different light. Like it's
Hmm.
not, how we do it now isn't how we did it 10 years ago, how
Yep.
people did it 20 years ago or whatever.
Hmm.
And I think we have to be able to pivot
Hmm.
and be able to like be agile enough to move with the times.
Yes.
And so we just have to almost like stay ahead of the curve because there's
Yes.
so much change, that's happening. And so we
Hmm.
have to, like to honestly stay relevant. You got to be able to kind of, you know what I
Hmm.
mean, like adjust. And I always say flex your style.
Yes.
That's something we say at work, which I hate like work cliches, but that's one that
Oh my
works
goodness.
for me
They
because I'm
try to
like, you
can them for
do.
you, don't they?
Yeah. I was like, but you do gotta be able to like flex, you know what I'm saying? And like
Yeah.
switch it up a little bit because
Hmm.
if you're doing something, you've been doing it and you're just like, oh, it just works, it's not gonna work. It's not gonna continue because the market is changing, the workforce is changing. it's almost like we're the boomers in a way, you know what I
Yeah.
mean? Like,
Yeah. The
like the
HR
people we
boomers
support.
just out
Yeah,
here
like the
kind of like,
HR boomers. Yeah,
yeah,
and it's not the same. And we got
yeah,
it because I know some of the people out. I don't want to call them kids because they're adults, but
they
child,
are. Yeah.
but they're
We just,
children. It's like, yeah, like having to support them, just the things I have to try to explain to them. They're just
yeah.
like, yeah, no, I won't do that.
Hmm.
I don't understand. Like it's I feel like it's constantly a tantrum. So
Hmm.
I
But I
say
think
that to
that
say,
too
yeah.
is important from an HR perspective because, like, you're totally right. Like, we are, well, first of all, I think there are some business leaders who would say that HR is obsolete. And I didn't want to put that out there, but I do know that that is kind of a
I
topic of
mean, especially
discussion.
with AI,
Yes, with
with AI
AI. I mean,
happening. Mm-hmm.
like, what can't you do with AI, right? Like, you need
Right.
notes.
Yeah.
You want to take the bullet points and make a nice presentation. Oh, AI has this for you, right? And so even
Mm-hmm.
like I've been looking, because we're on socials and stuff, and so sometimes you get ads, and one was
Yeah.
about just kind of like learning and development and how people go in and teach and like so many of the
Mm-hmm.
comments were like, well, why would we do that when we just have AI? Like, I like,
Yeah.
why would I pay you for that?
It's made us
Yeah.
it's making the workforce lazy.
Mhm. Yep.
Like because like our kids, they're
Mhm.
gonna have they already got tons of stuff that we didn't have, but they're
Yes.
gonna have like AI. Like I've used like Chat GPT, but
Yes.
it's after I've already done everything. And I'm like, okay,
Exactly.
I'm like, let me put this in here just to see if there's a way I could polish it a little bit. But like
Mhm.
I'm doing the research. Like
Yep.
I'm pulling out the encyclopedia for those
Yes.
that don't know. That was the original Google. But
Right.
it's just like all these things. So I
Yeah.
do think there's a way that like AI, Chat GPT, all these things can help and benefit us, but it is a crutch to like those
It
coming
is.
behind us. Like they
Yeah.
don't know how to do anything.
They don't. But what I think like people need to understand is that you have to have a basic knowledge. Like use the
Mm-hmm.
resources. I'm always one for using, especially
Yeah.
in this job because it's such a grind. It can be such a grind at times. Like,
Yeah.
I got into it because I wanted to help people. But those conversations are the ones that kind of got me through that corporate environment, but it did not allow me to make the impact that I wanted to make, right? And so I
Yeah.
would say to this new generation coming up, like, listen, just make sure you know what you're talking about before you go to these automated resources because if
Mm-hmm.
something goes wrong or is generating something that's just not on point, you still need to be able to read people. Like that's the
Mm-hmm.
biggest part of it, right? And so for
Mm-hmm.
me, I think a lot of the work that I'm focused on now is not only in addition to providing resources, but the actual study of people and work, right? And so there
Mm-hmm.
is an educational aspect to that. I'm trying to teach, right? So get
Yeah.
just kind of like diving into that space. But I think too, like, how can we be more efficient? Like even the comp cycle. I feel like every HR person I talk to is the same comp cycle all the time, and everybody at every company has an issue with the way this cycle is run. But what are we doing to change it, and what power do we have to
Mm-hmm.
change it? Do we have
Mm-hmm.
power? Because we're saying, oh, we're going to set this pay at this level because of what this agency or whatever has told us
Yeah.
about people in this particular market. And so I think for there to be ingenuity in HR, as we move forward, there has to be some willingness from a corporate perspective and a leadership perspective, business
Mm-hmm.
leadership, as I said, because what they say matters really.
Yeah.
It's kind of like, we're only HR because they are business leaders. And I do think that's an important thing to understand for anyone
Mm-hmm.
working in the field. But once we have this information, like, are we willing to go outside of the box? And how much is that going to cost, right? These are some of the questions that we will be
Mm-hmm.
addressing in today's, I guess, HR world, and as we move forward. So more to come, right, from
Yeah.
ADOT and myself. We are officially a business, right? We are an LLC. We are, yes, yes, yes. So we're working on what we provide to the workforce. I will tell you, any content you get from us is going to be unlike the things that you're getting from other people. Not because we are aliens or anything like that, but just because we have a different style. And for me, so much HR is making sure that people enjoy coming to work. people are really able to exercise their gifts. And so I will always try to be a catalyst for that. That's right, Parker James Consulting. That is us on the back end. So you'll continue to see things offered. Follow us on all of our socials. ADOT is going to put those either now or at the end of the show. And then if you're looking for something specifically, either as like an employee or as an organization, right? Like maybe you're out there, you're looking for a project, you want to, coach a team, you want to, do things like that, and you're not finding exactly what you're looking for, reach out to us because guess what? We're creative and we're flexible. So there's that. All right. So now that you've gotten an update on where we are, what we've been doing, how we're flourishing, okay, because we are, want to talk about some HR headlines, okay? Because there's a lot
Yes,
going
it's been a
on.
lot. Yeah.
It's so much going on. And really, like, I feel like even if we were to go over the summer, like, I know, okay, this is wrong. And I'm not just going to do a Diddy drop for the sake of doing a Diddy drop. But I'm gonna put
Take
it
that,
out there
take
because
that, take
someone
that,
said
take
to me
that.
the other day that they didn't want to get Diddied, and I really needed to understand what that meant. Like I did not understand. So that's how we like the HR
That's like
aunties.
the that's
Yes.
like the new don't drop the soap.
Yes.
Like don't Diddy. Don't drop the soap.
Well, first of all, there was many layers to the explanation, okay? Whether I agree with them or not. But I think it's important because I know people who have like kind of worked for around
Uh-huh.
for that organization and in that industry. And so if we could just, focus on that as like an HR topic, my goodness, we'd
Yeah.
have so much content. But we're not going to do it because
Yeah.
you know what that man is going through a lot. And I just don't want to be a part of it. I don't
Look,
want to be part of it. But what we
don't
will
tag me.
talk about
Mm-mm. Don't tag me. Don't add me.
don't
Don't send
don't
a
tag.
smoke signal. Don't do
Yes,
none of it.
yes.
I hate it
One
though,
thing
but yeah.
one thing ADOT has said to me in the past is don't bring me along for this. And I think that
I don't want to go.
she does not want to be brought along for a Diddy combo. But we did have some cool stuff, not cool, but I guess interesting things happen in the headlines, right? So one thing I want to
Yeah.
bring up is Shannon Sharpe, right?
Club Shay Shay, Uncle
Club
Shay
Shay
Shay.
Shay. Yes. And so, and to be fair, when ADOT and I were thinking about putting together this podcast, like we looked for inspo, right? We said, well, who are the best people out here doing this, right? Like, and why are people listening? And so, obviously, Club Shay Shay came into the conversation, right? And so, you've seen him
Mm-hmm.
do so many like iconic interviews, right? He's done
Yeah.
Cat Williams. I mean, even Marlon Wayans recently, right? There's a
Yeah.
lot of
Marlon
things.
Wayans, Monique.
Monique, yeah, yeah.
He even did one with Usher.
He did, yes.
One with
So
Usher
I think
too.
I like him as I know his background is primarily in sports, but I like
Mm-hmm.
him as a quote unquote journalist because this is what we are now. Like we have so
Mm-hmm.
many different mediums. There's no
Yeah.
oh, you had to go to J school or do whatever. Like you're a journalist. He's a journalist, right? And we get a lot
Yeah.
of information from his podcast. And I like it because he's able to get people to talk to him, right?
Mm-hmm.
I like that he has been able to have such a great repertoire with the people that have come on the show, and he's knowledgeable about like some of the struggles that they have because a lot of them are celebrities, right? And so he knows a little bit about that background. But most
Yeah.
recently, he's come into headlines because he was recorded on IG Live completing a quote sexual act. Okay.
Act.
Now,
Mm-hmm.
I'm not going to say what it was or what it sounded like. I think you can just go to the internet and
Yeah.
if you, yeah,
Yeah. It's definitely on the interwebs. But let me tell y'all,
yes,
he have you seen like the memes?
yes,
Like
so
when
bad.
I tell you all that heavy breathing and all that foolishness, like, sir. And I'm like, I know you know, you NFL, Hall of Famer, Pro Bowler, all the things, but sir, you're gonna have to run a few more laps because he sounded tired. He
I'm like,
sounds
do
so
you need?
tired.
Listen, he needs
Child, I'm like,
something
give
to
him an
stay
inhaler.
offline. Like what?
Child, look. But I'm gonna say this. When I saw it, and I think it might have been no, it was actually his page because I follow him.
Mm-hmm.
So I didn't see like when he went live or anything. I don't have
Mm-hmm.
notifications for that, but I did see like, oh, I was hacked. And the first thing I said to myself, no, you weren't. Like I
Yeah.
said to myself, like, no, you were not. Because I have only gone on IG Live once, but
Mm-hmm.
there are multiple steps
To get to IG
to
Live.
get to IG Live,
Yes.
sir.
Yes.
So I'm like, now
You
granted,
lie. No offense, but you lying.
I definitely knew it was a lie for
Mm-hmm.
sure. But I know he has people and he has a team and all these other things. So that was probably, and I think he came out later saying that like somebody on his team is the one that posted he was hacked or whatever. So I can
Yeah.
give him kudos for like owning to say like, I was not hacked. That wasn't true.
Mm-hmm.
This is what happened. I give him kudos for that.
Mm-hmm.
How and ever.
Mm.
We got to figure out these phones and all this technology because it's so many steps. So part of me is like, were you on Instagram scrolling
Yeah.
before Michelle came? Because that was her name. Like, ooh, that's my
Yeah, he
Michelle.
said,
If
but
you
he
listen
was
to it,
talking
it was
about
definitely
Michelle.
Michelle. So
Woo.
before Michelle got over there, were you like scrolling on IG or something? Because I know I have like been looking at something and say I stopped looking at it and I
Yeah.
don't like shut the app off. It'll still go, or sometimes you
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
like whatever. And I get that, but sir, that was a whole lot of steps. And I'm like, nobody
Mm-mm.
wants to hear Unc. I don't want to
Mm-mm.
hear it, Unc. I'm good,
So I think my
And
question is also like, I don't know who this Michelle person is.
yeah,
I've heard he's been with a Caitlin, who is a physical trainer or something to that
mm,
effect. Because I just looked him
mm,
up real quick before we talked about this. Not that I am
yeah,
like following Shannon Sharpe, but
yeah.
I don't know who Michelle is. But did Michelle set him up? Ooh, ooh,
I
crime
don't know.
podcast, maybe. No, I'm just kidding.
True crime.
True crime, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I just was like, ouch. But it's so crazy because like he corrected it, within a few hours. Like he got
Hmm.
on his nightcap podcast that he had for
Yes.
Ultra Cinco
Yep.
and talked about it, which is very funny, by the way. If you have not watched it or really
Yeah.
watched them anytime, it's hilarious. Especially
Please listen
Ocho.
to it.
He is so funny because like I think a few days before that, like
Uh-huh.
Unc was getting on Ocho about like not being professional and all this stuff, and then this
Yes,
happened. So Ocho Single dragged him. So
he
it
did.
was
He was like,
really
it's very
funny.
unprofessional.
Yeah. It was so funny. But I did like the fact that he owned it. You know what I'm saying? Like
Hmm.
he was like, hey, no, that's not what happened. This is what happened. At the end of the day, I'm grown.
Hmm.
People have sex, it
Hmm.
is what it is, so on
Hmm.
and so forth. And I was really glad that he didn't lose anything,
Right.
because so many times like these things happen. And I'm like, he
Hmm.
got a lot to lose. Like he has a very successful cognac brand.
Yes.
He has, obviously being on First Take with
Yep.
Stephen A. Smith. Then
Yep.
he has, what's it? I think it's another show like on ESPN
Yeah, I
that
can't
he's
remember
on
the.
as well. I can't
Yeah,
think of
he
the
was on
name
there
of it
too.
right now, but
Yeah,
yeah, but he's on that. And then obviously he has his own brand with Club Shay
exactly.
Shay and Nightcap and all of that. So he
Hmm.
has like a lot to do. Plus his legacy as an NFL Hall of Famer, Pro
Exactly.
Bowl.
Like
You know what I'm saying?
you don't want to be
Yeah,
taken
like
down by Michelle, whoever she is. Like we don't want
right. Like you
legacy
don't
ending.
want, yeah, like you don't
Yeah.
want this to be the end of like this is how your career ended. You know
Hmm.
what I mean?
So let me
So
ask
yeah.
you though, because like, and I'm gonna put it out there. I know you didn't think I
Hmm.
was, but I'm gonna do it. Is it fair? Because people have been canceled for much less, right? And so, do you think it's simply the way that he's dealt with it? Because I also know, or do you think the way he dealt with it was appreciated by his fan base, and his fan base are ultimately the people who are keeping him elevated where he should be. And the only reason I ask that, right, is because people
Hmm.
have been canceled for less. They've even come out and said, hey, I was wrong, right? I do think timeliness is important. So we kind
Hmm.
of talked about like big misses at work uh,
Yeah.
in season one. And so I think this is like a learning and a stepstone, right? Like just whatever you do, just own up to it and be like, I was wrong,
Hmm.
right? And do it as soon as
Yeah.
possible. Do you think that's what saved him, or do you think it's just the nature of his work? Or maybe we just don't take him as seriously because he is,
Um,
primarily a sports
I
celebrity.
I'm gonna take the spicy route
Okay. Ooh,
in my response.
caliente.
I think he didn't really get canceled because he wasn't doing anything anybody cared about in the
Fair.
grand scheme.
Hmm.
So,
Hmm.
like, had it been something political that he said
Yeah.
that people didn't agree with, if he was talking about a particular group of people, or something like that, I definitely think he would have gotten canceled.
Mm-hmm.
In this case, I think one, it's because, not like no shade to Unc Shay, but
Right.
like nobody really cares.
Ain't nobody checking.
Like
Yeah.
ain't
True.
nobody checking, like in that, in that regard. And
Mm-hmm.
I think too, like he had, when it comes to the space that he's in, he
Mm-hmm.
has enough pull to where it
Yeah.
won't matter. Now,
Yep.
granted, he's not a black woman. So I think if he was a black woman,
Ooh, something in my
I'm
throat.
gonna say, I think if he was a woman
Mm,
and then
mm.
add on a black woman, I
Okay.
definitely think he would have got canceled.
I think so. Yeah.
If I'm
Like
being
with not
honest.
even so much as a,
Yeah.
because we look at like how things are like kind of sexualized for women. And I'm glad that he didn't. I'm
Hmm.
not saying he should
Yeah.
have at all. I
Hmm.
just want that to be super
Yeah.
clear. But
Yeah.
I do think, when we talk about things in terms of employment, right? Because he could have lost his job. And so that's why I think
Yeah.
it's relevant to the podcast. I do think we need to kind of call
Yeah.
out
I
that
mean,
double standard. Yeah.
look at Jamel Hill, which
Yeah.
I love Jamel, by the way. Like, absolutely
She's
love her.
fabulous. Yes.
But like they completely threw her away when you really
They
think about
did.
it. Now, granted, she bounced back and did her thing. Like her podcast is doing numbers. Like she's
Well, but
interviewed
it's
so
because
many
she
great
took
people.
the ownership into her own hands. So it's
Right.
not
But that's
like,
what I'm saying. Like she
yeah.
did, she did her own thing. But at the end of the
Uh-huh.
day, like she could, her
Hmm.
platform and the content that she creates and all that could definitely, or should be like on an ESPN or like another big,
Oh,
like
absolutely.
big
Because that's where she
platform.
started. That's where she came from.
Yeah, that's
Like,
where she came from. But it's like
yeah.
she made a comment. She said what everybody else was thinking,
Hmm.
and she didn't lie. She was telling the
It was the
truth.
truth. And we've
It
seen
was
that.
all fact. Yeah, it was all facts. And then they
Hmm.
basically were like, "Fuck you."
Hmm. Like
And
you're done.
yeah, and she
Yeah.
was done. Even though
Hmm.
to us, like her true
Right.
fan base, she's not done. But
Hmm.
to that broader, kind of
Audience, that
like,
crossover. Let's talk about
yeah, that
crossover.
crossover, yeah, that
Yeah.
crossover audience, that industry and
Hmm.
all that, they're like, fuck her, you
Hmm.
know.
Yep. And she's
So
not,
yeah.
I would say from a commercial standpoint, I don't know that she's recovered. And that's, I think,
Mm-hmm.
the danger of the cancel culture, right? Because
Mm-hmm.
even, not that I'm saying like Chris Brown should not have been canceled. I'm not saying that. Please don't, please don't. But I'm just
Yeah.
saying, you see, like in his career, like even though he's still doing music, he's still touring, he'll never have the same level
Yeah.
of fame that
They
he
will not
had.
let it go. Yeah.
Yeah.
They're not letting it
Yeah.
go.
People
Mm-mm.
aren't going to
Yeah.
forget. So
Yeah.
I'm glad um, that Unc was able to kind of come through this unscathed. I would
Mm-hmm.
love to see more fairness, right, as we deal with these types of issues, because I guarantee you it's going to
Mm-hmm.
happen to a woman. And when
Yeah.
it does,
It's
how are we not going to,
Yeah,
pretty
I'd
much
like to see how it, how
yeah,
it pans
how
out.
it plays out?
Like you
Yeah.
said, I'm glad he was able to bounce back. I do
Mhm.
think the time of him addressing it and just being honest
Mhm.
played a factor into it.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I'll even go on to say like his persona,
Mhm.
it was almost like now it just gets to be funny.
Yeah, cuz it's like, well,
Like,
Unc
oh, well,
forgot.
Unc Shay
Unc
Shay,
didn't know how
he
to
get
go
it
on
in.
live.
Right, like, oh, like somebody, oh, he's senior citizen. Somebody show him how to get on the phone.
Yeah,
Make
yeah,
sure your
yeah.
phone cut off. So now
Yeah.
we get to laugh at it, but
Mhm.
I can't say that'll be the case for someone else.
Yeah, true. Now let's
Yeah.
talk about, so again, we're covering headlines that aren't necessarily like coming out this week, but things that, Ada and I have talked about individually and we just want to share it with the listeners. Another thing that came out, did you hear about the employee who died at Wells Fargo?
Yes, that
Died
was
at,
crazy.
yes,
I'm like,
yes.
how are you sitting at work for
For
what
four
was it,
days.
4 days?
One, two, three,
And
four.
nobody came to look. My thing was, and
Yeah.
nobody asked her if she wanted to go to lunch.
Or nothing.
Like none of her family, like I don't know if
Mm-hmm.
she had family, I'm assuming, but it's
Mm-hmm.
like nobody called to check in or
Or
because I'm
do
gonna tell
anything.
you, it's some people that I talk to pretty frequently.
Mm-hmm.
If I don't hear from them, like I'll give you a week depending on the
Yeah.
person.
Yeah.
But after that, I'm calling.
I'm
What's
calling.
going on? Like what's
Mm-hmm.
happening? Whatever. There's somebody I talk to literally every day.
Mm-hmm. Yep. You
Even if
have
it's
to.
a good morning, I'm like,
Yeah.
You say good morning, like you good, or
Yeah.
whatever, just because this is a routine. So it was wild to me that she was sitting there
And
dead
nobody, yeah.
before that, and
Honestly, to me,
nobody like to check on her.
it didn't surprise me. It did not surprise me. And the reason why, and you know this too, as someone who's working in HR, everyone out there listening who's working in HR, you know this. Employees die a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And that's one of the things in HR. So, like, for me, it's like a few things in HR. As much as I want to come and I want to help, there are some things that just stay with you.
Yeah.
One is when you lay people off, right? Especially like depending on the industry, because I've worked in industries where people have just like literally worked their whole professional career there. And they were like, oh, hey, we don't need you anymore. And you're not ready to retire, but we're going to get rid of you, right? So that's a tough thing.
Yeah.
um, I think it's also difficult for people, like if they get sick, right? And so I've seen a lot of people pass away who have
Yeah.
literally given their life to an organization. Like,
Mm-hmm.
you look at them and everyone's like, oh my gosh, it's so sad. You know, this person has cancer or they're in hospice. But I know a lot of that conversation that happens on the sideline is they work too hard, right? Uh,
Mm-hmm.
they didn't take
Mm-hmm.
the breaks, they didn't take the vacations, they dedicated their entire life to this work. And so I do think that that
Boy,
is
you
a part of the
preaching.
conversation. Yes, it's definitely part of the conversation. I think in this situation, and we'll go ahead and post it later on. I do have a link. I shared it with a dot. And so when we actually post that this episode is live, we'll go ahead and share those resources with you.
Mm-hmm.
But the union, right? So the union that represents this particular class of employees at Wells Fargo, they did some research and they have posted some research as well. And so
Mm-hmm.
I just kind of skimmed through it. But what you see is this, like, Wells Fargo is a huge organization. I've worked
Mm-hmm.
in companies where there have been tens and like 50,000 people, right? Like that is
Mm-hmm.
part of this organization. And so I think when you think about it with those numbers, what are the odds that someone would even know
Yeah.
that you're there? And so I think some of the
Yeah.
feedback that I saw when I was reading through the comments from the union was that, a lot of people are actually being forced. And so this is what I was talking about earlier in the show. We're going to talk about return to office. We're going to talk about, just kind of those hybrid work situations, because a lot of people are saying, from this particular union, right? And
Yeah.
it's just for Wells Fargo. I can't say for any other organization. But they're saying, employees were forced to come back into the office because there was a
Mm-hmm.
return to office initiative. I think a lot of us have kind of gone through that since COVID. Like, my most
Yeah.
recent position, I was hired as hybrid, but then they said, "Oh, we're returning to office," and they were like, "Oh no, you got to be here every day." I'm like, "Wait a minute, no."
Yeah.
so,
Right. I didn't sign up for that.
exactly. But I think that's one of the situations that happen. And so for this particular employee, no one else on her team or that would interact with her on a regular basis were actually housed in that office. And so that's how she was there for so long, because no one in the office really needed to interact with her. And so I think there's multiple issues being discussed here. One is, what is the actual benefit of return to office, right? Sometimes,
Yeah.
and again, I've been in different companies. I understand some companies need to, so for instance, I work for tech companies where they have a physical part of the supply chain. Let's just say that,
Mm-hmm.
right?
Yeah.
So they are a part of making, whatever technical thing that you want, that you can think of. They are a part of all of that, right? And so they
Yeah.
needed to be in office, not just because of the pace of the industry, but because of the need to stop any sort of delays, right, in that already cumbersome process. And that's where it makes sense, right? I think where it doesn't
Yeah.
make sense, this woman, she had primarily an administrative job that she could have been doing from home. She was in the
Mm-hmm.
office, she passed away. I think if I were an employee, because I have two different hats, right? If I were an employee thinking about this, I'd be like, oh man, that sucks. Like, maybe the company doesn't care, like she died, she was working her fingers to the bone, whatever. But as an HR professional, I know that this is a multifaceted issue, right? I
Yeah.
think I don't think it was intentional, right? It's not necessarily that I think Wells Fargo is like, oh, I don't care about my employees, but they're just a large organization. They have to make it work how it
Yeah.
works, right? And so they
Yeah.
probably made everybody come back just for fairness and equity, right? How do you make
Yeah.
one group come back and not another, right? So that's probably how they
Yeah.
all ended up in the office. But I think it talks, like, to me, it speaks to like the quality of engagement, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like she didn't have no calls with nobody. Like
That's what I'm saying.
she didn't
That
have a
was my thing. I was
yeah.
like, I said, so again, not knowing, not
Hmm.
understanding what her actual job was and the
Right.
duties and all of that. But it's like you didn't have no meeting you were supposed to be on. You
Hmm.
didn't have like there wasn't an email you were supposed to respond. Like there
Hmm.
was no, because it almost makes me wonder, did she die right after she got to work?
Exactly.
Because you know what
Yes.
I'm saying? Because it was almost like there's no way I could go to work, which I'm remote, but I,
Yeah.
travel,
Yeah.
whatever. There's no way I could like supposed to be on a meeting and don't join and somebody's not looking for me.
Yeah. Agreed. Because we're
You know what I'm
HR
saying?
though,
Like,
and so
but
that
I'm
I
just saying in
yeah.
general though, like, because there's business leaders where I'm like, okay, you scheduled this meeting. Where are you? Like, if
Hmm.
that meeting starts at 2 o'clock and at 2:05 they ain't on there, oh, I'm sending a G chat. Did you still want to connect today? Because we
Hmm.
have
Yep. Yep.
you,
I think.
you, you scheduled this. I mean, like,
Well, I think it's a two-way conversation. I think it depends on the organization too, because sometimes,
mm-hmm.
depending on where you're at, like the business leader can cancel whenever they want. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like
you're
I've
right.
worked in those places too. Like, oh, they're not accountable, but you are because we pay for you
Yeah,
and your HR.
right,
So you need to let
right.
us know. But I think like in any situation, like there's got to be like a weekly, like even with her own team, it's not no
That's what I'm
team
saying.
call. Yeah.
Right.
So
That's
I
what I couldn't
yeah
understand. I was like,
yeah.
I don't get it.
And maybe those things were in place, and maybe she didn't show up, and they said, "Oh, well, we're gonna write her up or whatever because
Right.
we
Or
couldn't
or or
before."
maybe they did,
Yeah,
or maybe somebody did reach out after the meeting, like,
yeah,
oh, we missed you, or we
hmm
don't, we only have what
we don't
they
know.
choose to put in the article, right?
Yeah,
Like we
yeah,
don't really know, but it's just like it was just very interesting. I think the other piece for me that was like outside of like the business of it was just
hmm
like, this is why I'm taking my vacation. This
yeah,
is why I'm setting up my boundaries. This is why I'm trying to make sure I invest in self-care for myself, because at
hmm
the end of the day, I could die on the job,
you
right?
could,
Or
yeah,
like allowing things that I cannot
hmm
control me, and I have
hmm
to be able to like, separate myself from that,
hmm
because at the end of the day, I can't get the time back.
you can,
You know what I'm
you
saying?
can,
So it's like,
yeah,
not to say like I'm gonna always make sure my work is done, and I
exactly,
tell my boss
yeah,
all the time, like, you'll never be looking for me. Like
mm-mm.
you always get
The
what you
work gonna be
need.
done before I
Yeah, the
leave.
work is gonna be done,
Yeah,
but actually I'm off this day. I'm taking off this time, this time,
and
or
don't
whatever.
call me.
Because yeah, and don't call me. Like, I need a minute, because
Hmm.
in order for me to show up well, this is what I need. And I need to be
Hmm.
able to
Yeah.
pour into myself. So
I agree. And I think it's so easy, especially in the types of jobs that we have, whether you work in HR or not. Like if you in that corporate life, you need your time
yeah,
off. I don't
you
care what
have
anyone
to.
is telling you about anything or whatever's happening at work. You need that time off because what ends up happening is you get, at least this is my situation. Like I felt like I was stressed for so many years, like at least
Mm-hmm.
like I don't know, 5, 6, 7, 10. I can't even count. You know what I mean? And just like this constant state of stress. And so if you don't take the time to reset, if you don't take the
Yeah.
time to say, I'm going to have something outside of this job, outside of this, even
Yep.
though, our jobs are so intense, like, because if I would allow it to, I could be working, most hours of the day. Right. And I've
Mm-hmm.
had jobs
Mm-hmm.
where I've had to get up, 5 o'clock in the morning, work before I go to work, get into work all day, get home, put my kids in the bath, get them dinner, and then work until, 11, 12, 1, 2 in the morning. So I've definitely
Yep.
had those types of jobs. And I think, HR or not, like the corporate environment can do that, right?
Yep. Yep.
One tech giant I worked for said, someone, it was kind of like a common saying, right? They were like,
Mm-hmm.
they'll do what you'll let them do, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I
Mm-hmm.
kind of took that and I keep that with me, um, because also I feel like I'm a pretty flexible person, and I
Yeah.
work a lot. Like I expect to work a lot in my roles, and so if I'm setting a boundaries because I truly need one, and I would
Mm-hmm.
encourage everyone listening, if you feel like you're burnt out or you're close to burnout or whatever, see what those boundaries look like for you. Like,
Yeah,
and what
for
is like
sure.
reasonable based on your role, right? And if
Mm-hmm.
it's unreasonable, maybe it's time for you to take a little break, take a step back, maybe take some
Yeah.
time off, reorganize things so that you can show up fully.
Mm-hmm.
But I do think it's really important to just make sure that like you're setting those boundaries, and perhaps this person, again, we only know what we see in the articles. They may have been a workaholic, quote unquote, right? Like, I don't know. They may have been the
Yeah.
type of person with little family, or maybe they didn't have, family that would reach out to them every day or whatever that looks like. And they probably just worked a
Mm-hmm.
lot. And maybe people just were like, oh, hey, another body in the
Yeah.
cubicle. I'm not sure. But I
Right.
think it's just a call out to just say, we need these jobs for our money, but we don't need these jobs for our lives. Okay, you're
That
important
part.
outside of work, and let's just honor
Yeah.
ourselves and just make sure we're
Right.
taking care of
Don't
ourselves.
let
So
work define like who you are. Like I
exactly.
always say like I don't want when the time comes for, the
Hmm.
Lord to see fit to call me home.
Yes,
I
yes,
don't want anybody getting up there talking about how good of a worker I was.
yeah. No, mm-mm,
You
no,
know, like
because
I
that's
don't
not
want
what's
that to
important in
be all
life.
people talk about. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mm-hmm.
and like as HR
Exactly.
professionals, we love work. We understand that work makes our jobs happen. It makes the world go round. But I think Ada and myself, we aspire to, and we hope that there could be, for our workforces that we support, there could be an opportunity for you all to have balance, right? Like, why can't we just
Mm-hmm.
come to work, do this work, and go home and enjoy our families and be happy, right? I think
Yeah.
when we talk about like unions and things like that, I do think that unions were influential.
Mm-hmm.
When we talk, especially when we talk about, 50, 60, 70, 80 years ago, definitely,
Yeah.
right? It
Yeah.
is one of the things that allow the people to come home and have that work life balance. I think now we're in a time where we're all expected to be on all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
so we just have to be diligent about that. But I think, in terms of unions, right? Because we've talked about them a few times during the show. And we
Yeah.
kind of I want to bring it up because I've just been reading so much in the news, right? So the last time we spoke, I remember talking to AJ and being like, what happened to Kamala? Like, I have not heard anything from her. Like, literally, I was like, what happened
Yeah.
to her? Because I
Yeah.
saw her when, Biden was elected and all of this. And we're not getting into politics. We're just, it's going to be a
Yeah.
union
Yeah. Yeah.
conversation, I promise you.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But I was like, what happened to her? I just have not seen her. She's not speaking on nothing. Like, and we're on socials. And so it actually, I guess, turned out that maybe their communication strategy was to keep her separate from Biden. I don't know. But literally,
I
like
don't
I would
know.
say a week or two after that, then we found out that she was going to actually run in this
Yeah.
year's presidential race. So kudos to
Yeah.
Kamala and whoever is running, right? Like, we definitely want to make sure that we have a better future for everyone, right? And I think
Yeah.
as someone who works in HR, like, I care about everybody, whether you care
Mm-hmm.
about me or not, right? And I just want
Right.
things to
Yeah.
be equitable. And so I think for me, like, that's just kind of what I'm looking for. But I think it's interesting because um, we were looking at, like, I was, preparing for the show, and I was looking for different headlines.
Mm-hmm.
And it turns out that the Teamsters, right, which is one of the largest unions here in the US, they
Girl,
have
they
one
still
point.
looking for Jimmy Hoffa.
Listen. Oh my God, I'm not. I'm gonna stop talking to her tomorrow, y'all. Um, so they've got like 1.3 million people that are part of the union. Typically, the union will endorse a candidate, especially for president,
Yeah.
right?
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes for smaller races, it just kind of depends on how it's going to impact the union. If you think about it from a corporate standpoint, right, like you have lobbyists and stuff like that, so that would make sense, right? Because
Yeah.
every corporation is going to like try to, get their
Yeah.
objectives achieved however they can politically. But what
Right.
I think is interesting is that the Teamsters have said they're not going to endorse any candidate, right? Democrat or
Mm.
Republican. And so this is really deviating from, tradition, right? Almost 100-year-old tradition, where they do select a candidate. And so I kind of wanted to bring this up on the show because I know, like, I've worked with unions in the past, but they have not been as large as some of the ones that Ada has worked with. So just curious, like, do you recall them, working in, so she's worked in like an automotive environment where they've had a union. Do you recall there being any sort of like conversation about political candidates, and how did that impact the employees?
So Not necessarily like a particular candidate per
Mm-hmm.
se, but I know we would always kind of be curious on like who would go be in office,
Mm-hmm.
because then that would determine how certain things would happen. Like,
Okay.
not necessarily in the plant per se, but like with the union. Now, granted, a lot of the appointed officials within the union, they had their own people that they were pushing, and
Mm-hmm.
like the little backdoor deal things, that
Mm-hmm.
would take place. But I don't recall them ever saying like, "Oh, we want it to be Trump," or "We want it to be Obama," or
Uh-huh.
that type of thing. It was just kind of like, well, depending on who it is, and that's how we know we'll get what we want, or
Mm-hmm.
if it goes one way or another way, then we might end up going on strike this year, or
Mm-hmm.
that type of thing. But I can't say they ever like actually endorsed anyone, at least not while I was there.
And so, in your experiences, these things that they're like, oh, if this person is elected or whatever, or this party is in power, we'll get X, Y, and Z that we want. What are these things? Is it like, so I'm thinking of something, and again, I don't know any affiliation with any union. This is just, what I thought of when I did the research. I'm thinking
Mm-hmm.
like, okay, if I'm in maybe like a UAW or something like that, United Auto Workers Union, right?
Mm-hmm.
And maybe there's Obamacare or something like, like free public health care. Is that something the union cares about? Do they not want it to be free because they want to show up as people who advocate for their employees? Like what are they platforming for? I guess.
Yeah, they really be it's really around like more money
Oh, okay.
at the end of the day. Like,
Mhm.
so for instance, the union that I supported, it was a part of their contract negotiations that the company paid for their health care anyway.
Mhm. Okay.
So, things like Obamacare, for example, it was kind of like, nah.
It's not a big deal.
Yeah, it wasn't
Yeah.
a big deal because
Yeah.
it was part of their agreement for us to do that. But when it came to like how much they were getting paid,
Mhm.
or having certain programs, specifically like skilled trades and things like that, that played a part into it, because that was something we were trying to get off the ground at the
Mhm.
time. So we had skilled trades, but they were older and kind of retiring out. It's like, well, how do we
Yeah.
bring more people in, and things like
Mhm.
that. So that was a conversation we were having. They were also, I want to say it was something, what were they campaigning about? I want to say this is when Trump was running the first time.
Mhm.
And he had the conversation with like the big three, so like General Motors, was it
Mhm.
Chrysler and Ford.
Mhm.
And he was like making all these promises, I guess, to them about like uh their different work schedules, and you
Oh.
know putting more money into like the plant itself. So like the
Uh.
union was kind of like, oh, if we could do
Mhm.
this, then we can get these things, we could take it, that like they always took things as everything was for them versus it
Mhm.
being for like everybody. You know
Exactly.
what I
Yeah.
mean? So
So
yeah.
really, it's probably just a focus on whatever they can benefit from. Like that's kind of what those
Hmm.
conversations are
Yeah,
like. So
they
they're
want to be able
rallying.
to like
Yeah.
exploit that. Like,
Yeah.
what can I get out of this?
Mhm.
How does this help us? Like, I
Mhm.
know this is something for GM, but how can I
How's this going
benefit
to
here?
exactly?
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it says a lot about the American political system, and I guess we just kind of go leave it at that.
Yeah.
Okay.
That
Yeah.
part.
Yeah, so I mean, we've talked about a lot today. You have a lot to look forward to for season 2 for the Spiller HR podcast. But we kind of want to put some questions out there to you. We're thinking about, kind of what you all want to hear about, what you would like for us to speak on. And so, as always, if you have any HR related questions, go ahead, hit us up. SpillHeRPodcast@gmail.com. That's SpillHER podcast@gmail.com. Ask us your unique questions. We will not say your name. And then that way we can have like an open and candid conversation. Because odds are is like, as an employee or as an HR professional, I'm sure somebody else has the same exact questions that you do. I know it's compensation season, and so I know that we have connected with a compensation professional. So if there's still a desire to have that person come on and kind of break down the way compensation happens for most people during this time, feel free to reach out and let us know. I know we have benefit open enrollment coming up, right? Some different
Mhm.
companies do it at different times. A lot of people do it in October 1 or October 30. So, definitely if you have questions about that, or maybe even like comparisons, right? Like, is it better for you to enroll in your company's healthcare or go to the open marketplace? I
Yeah.
wonder. Well, if you ask us, we can get a benefits professional on here and they can kind of let us know what
Yeah.
may be the best thing to do. So, yeah, just definitely reach out to us if you have any questions, any topics of discussion.
Yep.
Also, thinking about kind of like wellness and spirituality. We've kind of talked about maybe having like a Reiki healer on here because I know we talk
Mhm.
about stress and stuff like that. So if that's something that you guys are interested in, fine. If you kind of want like an outlook for the professional work week ahead, if that's something you're interested in, we have some contacts for that as well. So really, we just want to make this podcast something that's healing to us and you as well. We do want to be
Yep.
your resource for HR information, employment information, and everything in between. Ada, did you have anything else that you wanted to share with the folks?
Um, no, I think that's it. Like I said, we're so happy to be back. We've had our
Yes.
little break and all the things. Make sure to like continue to follow us like on Instagram. We're on TikTok. Yeah, I think that's it. Instagram, TikTok.
Hmm.
There actually was someone, we could talk about it later, but there was someone that sent us a topic. It was very, very interesting. So we'll get into that.
Yes,
But yeah, like definitely like reach out to us, you know, whatever you want to know. If we don't know it, we probably know somebody that does.
we sure do.
And
Yeah.
so again, we just want to make this like a good, you know, like a feel good space, like you're just talking to your
Hmm.
homegirls, or depending on how old you are, your aunties, and that's
Yeah.
okay too.
Hey.
Um, but yeah, but we appreciate all of the listeners and all those who are
Yes.
able to tune in. Oh, and definitely, you know, follow us on Threads,
Yes.
Instagram, TikTok, and YouTube because we're on there too. So
Yes. And so our
that's it.
plan is to post more frequently.
Mm-hmm. They kick her off. So I think someone got kicked off, but that's okay. It
Okay.
kicked you off.
You
It's so
did.
crazy.
I think it's because
I
she
didn't
don't
do
like the stuff.
anything. I
It's all
didn't do
right.
anything. I was just
No.
sitting here. I promise.
No, it was like, no, girl, we had enough. No, but just kidding. So yeah, definitely. Anything you want to talk about, let us know. We'll try to post more frequently. We're not going to commit to a particular frequency, but just
Mm,
know it's going to be coming. And definitely, you're going to help us, right? Because if there's something that you want to hear about or you think is interesting, we definitely will look to you for more content. So thank you
yeah.
so much, and that's episode 1. Bye,
Thank y'all.
y'all.
Bye, y'all.